to alleviate their circumstances. So given that knowledge, we have an obligation to act. We have an obligation to reduce that suffering, to reduce that pain. And that involves being part of an enterprise that reinvents education systems so that they don't continue to produce graduates who can't tell the difference between the dog and a sheep. And so my main takeaway from this meeting is that there is much desire for innovation and some good work going on already in Indonesia in helping to reinvent education systems, to equip students to be empowered to improve their circumstances and the many communities of which they are a part. And that's very encouraging. Another takeaway, of course, is that there is much need for innovation in Indonesia and elsewhere. And so what are my recommendations, my concluding thoughts? Well, the first one is that there is great power in bringing good people together. Good things happen when good people are brought together, as they were over the last 3 days here. The first thing that happens is that each of us discovers that we're not alone, that we're in good company. And because we are the company we keep, it is very important that these kinds of meetings have a continuity, that they're not an event, a one-off, but that they're really a regular process that builds a community of innovators that improve their practice as a result of sharing their practice with others, examining that practice critically, their own practice, learning from one another, and discerning which are the efforts that have the greatest success and how can they be scaled up. So my recommendations are the first one, that you try to figure out a way to constitute a regular forum for innovation that can both spotlight the good things that are happening, that can remind the people who are engaging the practice of reinventing education so that they can improve what they're doing. The second is that it's important to document what is going on so that it's possible to learn from it. All of you have a lot of tacit knowledge, private knowledge developed as a result of engaging in this practice of reinvention. But if that knowledge is going to be of use to others, if it is going to become public, it needs to be processed. It needs to document. Behind all of your interventions is a hypothesis. If I do A, B will happen. So it's important to make that hypothesis explicit. It's important to collect the kind of evidence that would help you discern, are you in fact achieving the goals you seek to achieve, and why are you achieving them? And then in making this type of knowledge public, visible, subject to the scrutiny and to the critique of other people, we can then improve on that knowledge and build a kind of knowledge base that is robust and that allows us to grow this small circle of friends that have gathered here for the last 3 days. So my second recommendation is that as part of supporting this ongoing forum that spotlights innovation in education in Indonesia and in the region, it's important to spend the efforts to document, to produce case studies, to produce different forms of research that tells us what are the underlying hypotheses behind these efforts. Are they achieving what the goals they seek to achieve, and why? The third recommendation is that I think it's important to translate this knowledge then into the kind of dissemination tools that help us understand what is involved in leading and managing these innovations. It's one thing to make explicit the hypothesis about what is it that you're trying to do. It's another one to produce the knowledge about what is the kind of leadership, the kind of management that is involved in getting results. And all of you have learned quite a lot from the process of generating these innovations. And that knowledge could also be made public and shared as a way to build the leadership skills of this community, of this growing community of innovators. And then lastly, I think it'd be very useful to figure out some practical and simple ways to share this knowledge, both about the good innovations that are taking place and the results, and the leadership that is involved in making that kind of change happen and allowing that kind of change to be scaled up, into something that can be shared with a very large community of ordinary citizens, of members of civil society, members of government at the local level, at different levels of government. So build online platforms document using multiple media, text and video and narratives, produce newsletters, have regular meetings, so that this information is actually shared and usable and accessible to others. So, in closing, I'd like to suggest the same thing that I suggested 2 days ago in response to a very good question from the audience, which is just do it, just act, just take the next step. It's been a pleasure to be here. I have learned a lot, and I leave very inspired from knowing of the good work that is taking place in this country, so that we can produce and provide the kinds of educational opportunities to people that will alleviate some of the suffering that we know goes on in this place and in other places around the world. Thank you.